It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us for our regular Theology of the Body Thursday segment is our executive director here at Redeemer Radio, Cindy Black. Thanks for being here, Cindy.
Happy Feast of St. Nicholas.
Happy Feast. You brought in donuts.
I did.
Oh, I shouldn't say that on there. Now we're going to get all kinds of people saying, can I come in for my donut?
There are a good number back there.
Okay.
But I did not put them in your shoes as an act of charity.
I appreciate that. I will receive the gift that you have brought with Thanksgiving. So, yeah, thank you for bringing this
Very good segue.
Yeah. Last week we were talking about receptivity, theology of the body, and I feel like it was only part of the story. We often talk about how it's good to be generous and to give, but that implies that there's somebody that's receiving it, and we have to also be receptive to people's generosity, to people's love, to God's generosity, to God's love. And it's almost like that you can't give what you don't have. So we probably first need to receive that before we can give.
And actually, whether we're aware or open to receive, like intentionally open to receive, we're receptive in the fact that we exist. So all of creation is here because it's been given by God. So there is nothing that we have that we haven't received.
Yeah.
And it's precisely when we recognize that we come to begin to understand who God is.
Right. So one thing that we didn't get into is, I think, what might be even a little more commonly associated with theology of the body, with receptivity, with gift of self, and being the receiver, this having like this male and female obvious example of the giver and the receiver, which produces life. Right. That complementarity of man and woman, which is such an amazing thing that it actually produces life.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So do you want to explore that a little bit?
Yeah. So like we've talked about all along, that we're all called to be self-gift and to give ourselves to others, and then also to receive the other in exchange that images the Trinity. And then in a unique way, the spousal relationship is a particular kind of self-gift where the bodies are meant to come together. And like you said, that is the only way. You have to have a male and a female to bring forth new life, new human persons. So the thought that the husband and wife express in their bodies what exists in their soul, that love, that self-giving love and desire to give and receive each other, then in the physical act, then personifies by being open to new life. So it takes the spiritual and brings it into the material world. And
not to go too much down another direction rabbit hole here, but this is where contraception rejects part of that giving and receiving. Exactly. Yep. So it's saying, I don't give myself completely to you, or I don't receive completely your whole being the way you were created. Okay. So this example of male and female, of husband and wife, is also used within the context of theology and our church, as we have all kinds of different examples of Jesus being the bridegroom. We have examples of the church being the bride, but then also we as a congregation would make up that church. And when we go to Mass, we are in that female, I guess, position of being receptive. Right. And again, we talked about this last week, but we have to not equate receptivity with passivity. It's an active reception. So it's making ourselves open, and then also being willing to give as a response to that. So it's not just I'm here like a blob just ready to receive anything in a passive way. And I think that that's sometimes where
some women can struggle with the notion of her feminine genius being equated with receptivity, is that we come to think of it as a passive one, and we see the masculine aspect of giver and initiator as the more powerful role. And if we understand it as a mutual exchange,
right,
then we have a greater understanding. But you bring up an interesting point, and I always wonder, because of my femininity and my innate openness to receive, and ever since I was a little girl, I thought of myself as someday being a bride. It is easy for me to see Jesus as the bridegroom and to appreciate my receptivity to that. But I often wonder if males struggle with that image as far as how they are to receive, or how do you reconcile that with your masculinity?
Yeah, I think that might be part of the issue with us kind of struggling as a church to get men to really be involved with the faith. I think there's a component to that. I think also we've talked on the concept of having a relationship with Jesus and the dialogue of prayer, where women tend to talk more and men tend to talk less. And I think there's a lot of those things that might make it more difficult for men because of this natural tendency. But at the same time, I think that even though in the male-female relationship there's the giver and the receiver that produces life, that doesn't mean that men don't also receive.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that women don't also give in the relationship. It's just in that component, there's a very obvious example of who is the giver and who is the receiver. But in the same way, going to church, I don't only go to Mass to receive. I also, in that full participation, in that active receptivity, I also have to give. I have to participate. I have to share. I have to vocalize the prayers. I have to be an example to my children and to the people around me. I give in the collection basket. There is giving as well in that participation. So I think in some ways that could be a strength if we recognize it. If we recognize that we have to put something in order to get something out sometimes.
Right. And it's looking back at the essence of the Trinity, that those things are happening eternally, simultaneously, the giving and receiving. Yeah. So in our relationships, that's how it best happens.
Yeah.
Not this notion of I first give and you first receive, and then out of receiving, then we give back. That ultimately we all receive from God, and then we give and receive mutually, or that's what we're called to do. And in our brokenness and our fallen nature, we do have a tendency to grasp or to wait until we receive to give. And that's what the Christian life is about, is step by step, or striving towards that self-gift and receiving others in a way that is godlike.
We're talking with Cindy Black here for Theology of the Body Thursday, talking about receptivity. This is kind of part 2 of our discussion. Go back and listen to last week's discussion. You can find that at kylehyman.com or in the Redeemer Radio app, wherever you get podcasts, or YouTube channel, all kinds of different ways that you can go back and listen to last week's conversation of receptivity. Actually got quite a bit of enthusiasm and feedback on that, so definitely check that out. But whenever we're talking about Jesus as the bridegroom, this kind of comes up often in Scripture and theology of the body. What do we mean by that? And in what ways is Jesus the groom or the husband in this spiritual metaphor?
Well, God himself is who uses that metaphor as revealed through Scripture. And so our role is to accept that and then try to see how that fits within our spiritual journey. That, God is presented as Father, but then also as, Jesus is the bridegroom and we are the bride. He lays down his life. He makes a complete self-gift. And I think that using that particular relationship helps us to understand love being a choice. Whereas mother and fatherhood, you do choose to love your children, but it's a more innate, and you receive this child, you don't choose this child. You receive the particular child. Whereas the spousal union, we have chosen this person, and each and every day continue to choose to give of ourselves to that. And in that, Jesus chose to give himself to each of us in union. I think it helps us to understand that depth, that both dimensions of like parenthood and spousal love give us a deeper sense of just how that love is. It's the love that God has for us and the love that we're meant to live with him for all eternity, that communion of persons, fulfills all of those relationships, all of those types of self-giving, friendship, family relationship, spousal relationship, that God is the fulfillment of all those relationships, all those mutual giving and receiving relationships.
Okay. And so then how does that turn, if the church is then the bride, what is our role of the receptivity?
Well, we receive what God has given us, and then we're called to carry that out to others. And especially in this time of Advent and preparing for Christmas, that we are called to make God known, like to be incarnational people, to take what we have received from God, that gift of himself, that emptying out for the sake of the other, then we're called to live that out and make Christ birth, so to speak, in the world. So the church is meant to be receptive to God's fruitful love and then to share that. And that's where the feminine genius really has something to teach all of us, not just women, about how we are, that we have a special capacity for making room for another physically.
Yeah.
And that's how we're all called to live that self-gift, to make room for the others, our neighbors, the people that were presented in the course of the day, to make room for them to grow and flourish into who God created them to be as well.
All right. Well, again, another great look at theology of the body and how really everything that we do it fits in with theology of the body. So there's so much that we can learn from it. So if you have any questions about it, thoughts, suggestions on future topics within theology of the body, let us know. You can email show@redeemerradio.com and definitely check out the past episodes too. Thanks, Cindy, for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.